Alice stared at the cluttered bulletin board outside the local grocery store, her eyes scanning past ads for lost pets and yard sales. It was October 30th, the day before Halloween, and she was gripped by a nostalgia that she couldn't shake off. Where did all the magic go? Halloween used to be an event, a ritual almost. Now it's just another day. "Alice, are you still there? Earth to Alice." David's voice jarred her from her reverie. He was her oldest friend, a voice of reason to her flights of fancy. Yet even he had lost that youthful exuberance that once made Halloween special. "Yeah, sorry, just lost in thought," Alice mumbled, forcing a smile. "You've been standing there for 10 minutes. Find anything interesting?" David asked, his eyes locked onto his smartphone. Before Alice could answer, another figure approached the board. A teen with jet black hair and an almost magnetic aura of curiosity. It was Fiona, a local girl known for her love of horror fiction and all things uncanny. "Hey, Fiona," Alice greeted, noting the girl's eyes widening at a particular poster on the board. "Hey, Alice, David," Fiona responded, her voice tinged with an excitement that Alice envied. "Have you seen this?" She pointed at an old-fashioned, intricately designed poster that neither Alice nor David had noticed before. It read, "One night only. Experience the unforgettable Halloween spectacle." Below the text was an illustration of a circus tent, its stripes alternating between deep black and a disturbing shade of crimson. Alice felt her heartbeat quicken. Could this be the magic I've been yearning for? David squinted at the poster. Seems gimmicky. Probably just some magicians and people in costumes. Fiona shook her head vehemently. "No, this is different. It's like something out of a storybook. Don't you feel it?" Alice nodded. "I do. Let's go. We have to." David sighed, pocketing his smartphone. "You two and your Halloween nonsense, fine. Let's go. But if this turns out to be as dull as I suspect, you owe me a drink." The trio tore off one of the perforated tabs at the bottom of the poster, each holding it as if it were a talisman. The paper seemed unnaturally cold to the touch, and as they walked away, each couldn't help but feel both enticed and unnerved. "Meet here at 8 p.m., Alice said, a sense of determination filling her voice. "We're going to rediscover Halloween. We're going to that circus." As they parted ways, each felt a peculiar mix of anticipation and apprehension. Yet not one of them could predict the incomprehensible experiences that awaited them, experiences that would forever alter their perceptions of reality, time, and the hidden darkness that underlies even the most innocent of celebrations. Alice stood rooted to the designated meeting spot at precisely 8 p.m., her eyes occasionally drifting toward the impenetrable wall of fog that lay ahead. Her heart pounded in her chest like a tribal drum, resonating with a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. She felt the evening chill as a tactile shiver down her spine, a sensation intensified by her jacket's insufficient insulation against the autumnal air. The streetlights cast their glow reluctantly, flickering as if struggling against an oppressive force that sought to dim their luminescence. David arrived with a posture that conveyed skepticism even before he spoke. His eyes were hooded, guarded, and he wore a scarf that seemed to function as much as a protective shield as a garment against the cold. "I can't believe I've been ensnared in this fanciful escapade," he intoned, his voice imbued with a hint of reluctant curiosity. "Is he really here or just going through the motions?" Alice questioned silently, holding her expectations in check. Fiona made her appearance moments later, her youthful face flushed with a fervor that was nothing short of infectious. Her jacket was a tapestry of horror-themed patches, each emblem an ode to her devotion to the eerie and uncanny. "We're stepping into a tale tonight, aren't we?" Her voice was tinged with an urgency that made it clear. For her, this was not just another evening out. It was an odyssey into the unknown. "We're about to find out," Alice replied, her pulse quickening as she unfolded the small piece of paper they had torn from the bottom of the poster. She read aloud the address, each syllable infused with potential significance. "The field by the old mill. It's just a short jaunt from here." Together, the trio ventured into the fog, a mist so dense it felt as though they were wading through a ghostly sea. With each step, the fog responded, thickening and curling around them as if sentient. The atmosphere was tinged with a haunting aroma, a blend of wet earth and a disturbingly sweet scent that Alice couldn't quite place. It was as though the fog itself were trying to communicate, to warn or perhaps entice. Then, as if passing through an invisible barrier, they emerged into clarity. What lay before them defied easy description, a towering circus tent standing majestically in the center of the now mist-free field. The canvas of the tent shimmered as if woven from iridescent threads, catching elusive glimmers of light that seemed to emanate from within its depths. The black and crimson stripes appeared to undulate subtly, producing an illusion, or perhaps a reality, that the tent itself was a living, breathing entity. David's eyes widened, his initial skepticism momentarily forgotten. "This is beyond the scope of any art installation or visual technology I've ever encountered," he admitted, visibly taken aback. He looked at the tent and then back at his friends, his internal debate palpable. Am I standing at the threshold of a world that defies logic? Fiona was captivated. Her gaze locked onto the tent with an intensity that bordered on reverence. "Do you see it? The patterns in the stripes, they're almost like runes or sigils. It's as if the very structure is encoded with esoteric knowledge." Her voice quivered as she spoke, a vibrato of awe and wonder. "Have we stumbled upon a gateway, a fissure in the fabric of the mundane?" Alice wondered, her senses tingling with an electrifying blend of anticipation and primal fear. As if summoned by the emotional energies they exuded, the tent flap parted. Out stepped Cornelius, the ringmaster, a figure whose physical age seemed inconsequential next to the aura of timeless vitality that emanated from him. Dressed in a coat embroidered with arcane symbols that matched those on the tent, he extended an arm gracefully, as if inviting them into not just a tent, but a different realm altogether. "Ah, dear patrons, you've arrived," he crooned, his voice a tapestry of allure and subtle disquiet. "Your seats await. Prepare to relinquish your preconceptions at the threshold, for tonight you shall witness the unfathomable." The air seemed to thicken with his words, becoming almost viscous with portent. As he handed them tickets that appeared to materialize out of thin air, each felt a sensation akin to an electric charge passing through them, a pulse of energy that hinted at alchemical transformations yet to come. Alice finally breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. Fiona nodded, her face flushed with an emotion that was neither simple excitement nor mere curiosity, but something far more complex and profound. David hesitated but pocketed his ticket. "After you," he finally said, gesturing for Alice and Fiona to precede him. As they crossed the boundary into the tent, each felt a visceral sense of dislocation, as though they had stepped off the edge of their known world into one governed by unfamiliar laws and uncanny phenomena. As they crossed the threshold into the grand tent, each sensed an immediate shift in the atmosphere. The air was denser here, almost viscous, like moving through a sea of unseen energy. Encased within the cavernous expanse were not just seats and a stage, but an entire universe of oddities, so richly layered that it defied immediate comprehension. The trio found their seats in an ornate row. The craftsmanship was impeccable, the upholstery woven with intricate swirling patterns that seemed to move when looked at from the corner of the eye. They were seats fit for royalty, yet the moment they sat down, they realized the chairs seemed unwilling to adapt to their forms. It was as though the furniture rejected their biological warmth, remaining cold and strangely immutable. David felt disoriented. He glanced around, searching for some point of grounding. The audience was an uncanny mix, a hodgepodge of humans who appeared somewhat off and ethereal beings that seemed to phase in and out of visibility. "Do you see this?" he whispered to Alice. "The audience is part of the performance, part of the spectacle. There's no line between us and them." Fiona was already staring, transfixed, at the performers who were taking their positions. They defied categorization, neither human nor animal, mechanical nor ethereal, but some unnerving combination of all. "Look at their forms. Those can't be costumes. The way they move is too biological. It's like we're in a museum of impossibilities." Alice felt the weight of their observations sinking in, each comment layering complexity upon complexity. The circus was a kaleidoscope of enigmas, each more baffling than the last. "This place is rewriting the rules of physics, of existence," she muttered, almost to herself. "Is reality more malleable than we think, or have we stepped outside of reality altogether?" Then, with an abruptness that caused several patrons to gasp, Cornelius appeared in the spotlight. His entrance felt less like a physical arrival and more like a sudden coalescence of energies. Cornelius gestured broadly with his ornately carved staff, and the tent darkened as if on cue. "Prepare to be amazed, frightened, and most of all, entertained. Our artists are masters of the unexplainable." As Cornelius vanished into the shadows, a lone spotlight illuminated a petite figure ascending a rope ladder. She reached a trapeze suspended high above, and the crowd hushed in anticipation. With a graceful leap, the trapeze artist detached from the platform. She twirled in midair, but as she extended her arms and legs to catch the next swing, something astonishing happened. Her limbs stretched, fingers elongating into tendrils, legs telescoping farther than any human anatomy should allow. They reached the next trapeze with unsettling ease, leaving the audience simultaneously fascinated and horrified. David felt his analytical mind glitch. This isn't just defying gravity, it's defying biology. No machinery or strings could achieve such an effect. He glanced at Fiona and Alice, sensing that they too were grappling with the implausible spectacle before them. Alice's eyes were saucer-wide. "I never thought I'd see something that would make me question my own grasp on reality. This is both a nightmare and a dream." Fiona was leaning forward in her seat, eyes shining. "This has to be more than mere spectacle. This is arcane artistry. This is what I've been yearning for. It's tantalizingly close to what I would call magic." As the trapeze artist descended, another figure emerged. A juggler with a serene face began his act with standard pins, but gradually introduced glowing orbs into the mix. These orbs vanished in midair, as if swallowed by the darkness, only to reappear in his hands just in time to maintain the cycle. It was as though he was juggling with pockets of void. David felt a pang of discomfort, his skepticism wrestling with the inexplicable. "Even with high-level technology, I can't rationalize this. These acts are unsettlingly supernatural." Last but not least, a mime stepped forth. With the traditional black and white attire and a painted face, he seemed almost mundane compared to the prior acts. That was, until he gestured to an imaginary box and invited an audience member inside. The man hesitated, but finally stepped into the designated space and vanished. The audience gasped. When he reappeared moments later, he looked bewildered and disoriented. Something is fundamentally wrong here, David thought. His analytical mind was scrambling to make sense of what was an increasingly chaotic tapestry of paradoxes. For Fiona, every act was another layer of mystery to peel. These aren't mere tricks or illusions. They're pieces of a greater enigma, and I am desperate to solve it. Cornelius re-emerged from the dim recesses of the tent, his cane tapping lightly against the soft earth as he moved to center stage. "Ah, my enthralled audience, we have one final act for you, one that will transcend the barriers between the corporeal and the abstract. Who among you is courageous enough to volunteer for a transformative experience? His eyes, impossibly dark, yet glinting with a feral luminescence, locked onto Fiona. A magnetic pull seized her, as if her very essence were being summoned. Before she realized what she was doing, Fiona was on her feet. "I'll do it," she declared, her voice tinged with a sense of destiny. David and Alice reached out almost simultaneously, as if their instincts had synchronized into a collective premonition of danger. "Are you sure, Fiona? This feels too hazardous," Alice warned, her intuition pulsating like a second heart. Something is about to unravel, something not meant to be understood. "Think this through. There's something awry here," David added, his intellectual reservations morphing into existential dread. Ignoring their pleas, Fiona stepped toward Cornelius, led by a compulsion that had intensified into a full-blown craving for enlightenment. Or perhaps a terrible form of recklessness. Cornelius guided Fiona to an ornate, full-length mirror framed with inscrutable runes. Unlike any conventional mirror, this one was devoid of reflections. Instead, it displayed a fluid tapestry of alternate realities, some paradisiacal, some hellish. "Step into the abyss," Cornelius murmured, his voice a sibilant whisper that seemed to caress the very folds of her brain. As Fiona stepped through the frame, she felt her consciousness fracture into a multitude of experiences and emotions. When she returned, mere seconds later, but what felt like decades to her, her countenance had drastically altered. Her eyes, once vibrant, were now dilated windows into a soul that had aged a lifetime in moments. "My dear guests, the circus you've so graciously attended is no mere spectacle. It is an entity, an organism, if you will, nourished by the emotional and temporal energies of its patrons," Cornelius intoned, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Tonight, Fiona has contributed most generously to our sustenance." Alice and David were flabbergasted, their worst fears dwarfed by the reality now laid bare. Fiona rejoined them, her eyes carrying the wisdom and despair of someone who had ventured too far into the unknown. With Fiona's return to their side, a palpable tension tightened around the trio like a noose. Alice looked at the entrance, their supposed gateway to normalcy. Yet when she moved toward it, the path seemed to elongate, each step pulling her further away from the exit. Reality is collapsing, its fibers coming undone, she thought, her initial nostalgia now mutated into a wretched apprehension. David was the first to vocalize it. "We need to leave, now. This place isn't just bending reality, it's fracturing it." As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the tent, the trio encountered a spectral figure, pallid, almost incorporeal, hovering in a fluctuating state of being and unbeing. "To leave, you must offer a soul. Otherwise, you will become permanent residents, like me," the figure intoned, its voice echoing the forlornness of eons. As the weight of the figure's words settled in, David felt his analytical skepticism pivot into something far more potent, a metaphysical revolt against the confines of this place. "Can I harness my doubt, my skepticism, to unravel the threads of this illusion? If I surrender a fragment of my soul, could it serve as the cost for our escape?" Closing his eyes, David summoned every last shred of his rationality and disbelief, projecting them as a counterforce to the circus's insidious manipulation of reality. For a moment, the environment quivered, the air rippling like a disturbed body of water. In that instant, they sprinted toward the exit, which for the first time seemed within reach. As they broke through, David felt something snap, a loss so subtle yet irrevocable that he knew he would spend the rest of his life trying to identify it. As the first rays of dawn pierced the morning fog, Alice, David, and Fiona stood at the vacant lot where the circus had been. The weight of the preceding night lay heavy on their shoulders. The silence between them felt both intimate and infinite, charged with the complexities of what they had endured together. Alice picked up a crumpled ticket stub from the ground, the indecipherable symbols now hauntingly clear in meaning. She held it between her fingers, contemplating whether to keep it as a reminder or to discard it as a form of catharsis. Eventually, she let it slip through her fingers, the paper carried away by the wind. Perhaps some memories are better left as echoes, whispering through the corridors of our minds, but never fully taking shape again. David looked at his friends, his eyes carrying an unspoken understanding of the bond they now shared, a bond forged in the crucible of an extraordinary, horrifying experience. He felt a deep, irrevocable sense of loss, as if a vital component of his very essence had been excised. The world around him felt both sharper and duller, as if a layer of reality had been peeled away, revealing an underbelly of inexplicable phenomena and existential uncertainties. Fiona, her eyes older but wiser, stared at the empty space as if she could still see the remnants of the circus that had so dramatically altered the course of her life. She had sought the extraordinary, and it had consumed a part of her she would never get back. Yet, in that loss, she had gained something else: insight into the fragility and complexity of the human condition. The trio exchanged glances but said nothing. Words were too inept to encapsulate what they had undergone. They turned away from the empty lot and walked back to their respective lives, each step laden with a newfound gravitas. The calendar had cycled back to October, and the scent of autumn leaves mixed with the aroma of pumpkin spice as the trio reconvened in a dimly lit coffee shop. The familiarity of the setting only accentuated the ways in which they had all changed. Their past selves felt like shadows, flickering on the edges of their current realities. Alice glanced at the menu, but ordered nothing. Her once comforting love for all things Halloween was now a bittersweet enigma, a fractured lens through which she saw a world both brighter and darker than before. She carried her nostalgia like a relic, a talisman that had lost its magic, but not its meaning. David had grown contemplative, occasionally diving into esoteric philosophies and ontological paradoxes in search of answers. He was hunting for the missing piece of himself in pages of Kierkegaard and Kant, but the void within him seemed to expand with each newfound theory, pulling him further from the comfort of certainty. Fiona, the youngest but now somehow the oldest, bore the countenance of someone who had peeked behind life's curtain and found an unsettling tableau. She was an enigma to her peers and family, her perspectives laced with a wisdom that belied her years, yet burdened her with existential disquiet. As they sat there, sipping drinks that no longer tasted the same, Fiona noticed a flyer stuck to the bottom of her cup. She peeled it off, staring at the intricate symbols and fine print. It was another circus announcement, eerily reminiscent of the one that had set their fates into motion. The atmosphere in the coffee shop seemed to pause, the background noise fading into a dissonant hush. Fiona looked up to share this uncanny find, but Alice and David had risen from their seats, ready to disperse back into their individual lives. "It's been a year," David finally said, his voice tinged with melancholy and uncertainty. "Maybe it's best we part ways. For good." Alice nodded, her eyes welling up, but no tears falling. "Some things are too costly to revisit," she added, leaving an open question hanging in the air. Fiona folded the flyer and tucked it into her bag. "We are forever bound by what we've experienced, whether we revisit it or not," she said, her voice imbued with a solemn resignation. "The allure of the extraordinary can both bless and curse. It's a lesson we'll carry, always." And just like that, they parted. Three souls adrift on the murky waters of existence, forever changed, forever haunted. Another town would soon bear witness to the same enigmatic circus. But for Alice, David, and Fiona, the allure of the extraordinary had lost its sheen, replaced by a cautionary tale written in the indelible ink of experience.